Well, good afternoon, Brittany. Tell us. It's good to see you.
Good to see
And for
you.
those who are wondering, Scott is traveling and not with us today. So Brittany and I get to talk about today's field note, and it is the common feedback that you don't bring people along with you. So when I first read the title, I had the impression of what that meant, and I think I was wrong. What was your first impression when you read this headline today, Brittany?
There's always that like split second preconceived notion. You're like, common feedback. Of course, I'm thinking back to all the things that I've, either said to leaders or things that have been said to me over the years. So I really just projected my own experiences onto what the field note was actually going to be.
Right, right. And so, and my first impression of you don't bring people along with you was with the idea of like when you're being promoted, you have the tendency to not bring. And I thought, is that
Mhm.
actually very common? But
Right.
that's not the so. But in reading it within the first couple paragraphs, we understand that this idea of like like as a way of saying you're not communicating well, you're not bringing the idea that you're trying to bring to life along with you so well, that's one that might be a little more common for people to hear, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think people hear it a lot and don't think deeply around what that means. They're like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Some people just sort of shrug it off and say, well, that's in the rear view. That thing has been done. On to the next thing. And they continue the same pattern and don't take that brief pause to reflect on maybe I should have, brought someone into that conversation and
Right.
kind of unpack that logic a little bit.
Now, there's two different aspects of it that we're highlighting in today's field note, but one in particular, because we've taken time in previous field notes to talk about the idea of the rationale and the buy-in, right? And
Hmm.
so in a previous field note, it's titled Gaining Buy-in for Decisions. It was written back in 2022. So for those that are listening right now who are interested in what that field note or two, actually, if you search on field notes in through the archive, you'll see that this subject kind of comes in quite a bit. So search for terms like subscription or buy-in, but this particular title, Gaining Buy-in for Decisions, is something that we've covered like in detail. There's specific
Yeah.
behaviors like how to buy in, but that's not really what we want to talk about in today's field notes. Today is more about the idea of like the communication challenge, which is great that you're here with us to talk about this particular communication challenge. So organizationally, what do you see, right? Like we're talking maybe specific about individual leaders, but this is true organizationally. This is a real
Oh, yeah.
communication challenge, isn't it?
Absolutely. I see it not just with individual leaders, but I see it with entire leadership teams where they're just two, three, four steps ahead of their teams. And it's really not even about the speed. From my experience and what I've seen is that it's really about transparency. And so it's they're moving at this breakneck pace, but they're failing to sort of narrate that thinking process. And people need to see that reasoning. They don't just want to see the end point. They want to understand how you got there.
Right. So, in the last couple of field notes, we talked about belief because statements, like these short statements that kind of articulate a leader's belief and the logic that kind of backs it up. So, come up with these belief because statements. And my guess is that sometimes, the belief because statements rattle around in a leader's head and they think that they've said them a lot, right? And their experience with the statement itself or with
Mhm.
whatever it is that they're trying to communicate is the fact that they've said it 25 times. They're tired
Oh,
of
yeah.
saying it, right? But that's where they get themselves 4 or 5 steps ahead, right? Is because
Yeah.
not everybody on the team has heard it as many times as you had. And your tendency to feel like you don't want to repeat yourself is probably hurting you, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, 100%. And I think sometimes leaders, Mikey, kind of see the bringing people along as like extra work, but that really is the work as a leader and the time that you spend explaining your reasoning. And sometimes you might have to do that till you're blue in the face, but getting that, really getting ahead of that helps at the end point. So people are fully bought in. They understand the why. And if they don't understand the why, they really can't improve the how. And so the more that leaders can bring people along for that journey. I often talk to leaders around, okay, if this is what we want to do, what are the series of conversations that need to happen? How do we bring people along for this journey to make sure that no one's caught off guard and sort of, folks understand every point that, or decision rather, that's made. They're being brought along for that, and they understand it deeply.
Right. And so what have you personally seen from corporate communicators that you respect and think are the best at this type of thing? Do they have like in common kind of things that they do quite a bit? What are their behaviors that kind of stand out?
Yeah, that's a great point, Mikey. And what I see a lot of the best communicators do is sort of inviting people along, but also with that, asking them to sort of challenge their thinking along the way. It's a huge credibility builder. And so
Challenge their own thinking.
oh, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And so it's not just telling people what you're thinking, but you're actually getting them to sort of probe your own logic and maybe assumptions even. And so it's a lot of leaders saying, okay, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I'm seeing. Tell me, what am I missing? And that for folks is like, oh wow, not only are you explaining your rationale to me sort of as it's unfolding, but you want to get my opinion. That I see is something that's very effective with some of the best communication folks in leaders that I see.
Okay. So the phrase "tell me what I'm missing" stands
Yeah,
out to me as
goes a long
something
way.
that, right. And so those leaders probably on their teams or in that suite that they're leading in have the ability to be able to get everybody's buy-in that way as well. Do you think that's the sneaky way that a lot of the best communicators actually start to get other people's buy-in as well?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
it's really all around how you frame it. And maybe it's a piece of your decision. Maybe you don't want to give them the whole enchilada, but maybe there's a segment where you're like, let me get their opinion on this. And so you can be very strategic and intentional about what you want to bring to someone. But you're absolutely right. That buy-in, it starts with getting people kind of getting some hands on the bag. People have a little skin in the game when they sort of know that they're part of that decision-making
Right.
process in a real way.
Right. So, and I like the phrase "tell me what I'm missing" because it doesn't preclude, like, I want to be authentic when I'm going to use that phrase. I really want to stay curious about things. But if I've had this conversation 20 times and you're the 21st person I've had this
You're right.
conversation with, I
Yeah.
start to get the feeling maybe I'm not missing anything. And so,
Mhm.
but I want to ask it in a way where I actually genuinely am interested in some of the holes that you might see that I don't see.
Absolutely. And you might be surprised when you get to that 21st
Right.
person. That might be the person who you would have never in a million years thought to speak to, and they have a point of view that you may have never considered otherwise.
Right, right. Okay, so in some cases, I'm reading here in the field note, team members will intentionally resist directions or tasks set unilaterally without explanation. Right?
Hmm.
When that happens, it's usually because maybe we've gone through 21 "tell me what I'm missing" conversations, and we feel like, okay, well, that's all covered. Like all the holes are plugged. So now when I have this conversation, the 22nd, 23rd, 24th, I'm ready to actually start handing out assignments, right?
Yep.
And that's when people start to get resistance. It's like, okay, I've been all the way down through the road. So where's the mistake in a leader's thinking at that point?
Yeah, I think just generally speaking, people just resist being told what to think. And going back to what we were just talking about, I think it's the inviting people in to think with you is what really helps. And so I think some folks are like, here we are, I'm the 20 something person, and people can tell very quickly whether you genuinely want their input or not.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think people can very quickly pick up on what the purpose and the intent is behind something. And so I think leaders have to be a little bit more intentional when they see that resistance and dig deeper and understand the why behind it. But a lot of times I think, just I'm a broken record on this, but just being excluded from that process, it can feel like folks are being disrespected sometimes.
Right. So you try to imply that in the organizational recommendations that you make all the time
Oh yeah.
then.
Yeah.
Do you see any behavior that, like with your experience with organizational communication, is there any way that you would recommend that organizations roll out an initiative that seem to be any different than the way that an individual leader might do it? Or does it feel like every step is hit the exact same kind of a way?
Yeah, two depends, which is probably not the satisfactory answer there. But I do think that there is probably some sort of a general framework, a way in which organizationally teams can approach it. I think it starts with that buy-in at the leadership level, at the executive level, excuse me, getting that commonality, that agreement from the jump. And so everyone is singing from the same song sheet. That's one of the things I see most often that kind of gets missed. It's sort of this person's going out and they've got their own agenda. You see this misalignment, and then you've got these different paths that are being pushed down inside of organizations, and it creates a lot of friction and inconsistency in the message that we're trying to accomplish or at
Right.
least disseminate.
And so, what is in your experience, what is the most common thing that organizations miss? That when you bring it up as just like a normal step in your procedures,
Mm.
it feels like, oh, it's revelatory. Is there anything like that that is a really common thing that organizations miss?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just sort of the crux of what we're talking about. And again, going back to the bringing people in, they forget to include that extra step of saying, oh, we should have had maybe instead of a broader town hall, we should have done smaller sessions with different departments. It's really coming down to like, especially inside of very large organizations, how can you get those messages out in a timely fashion and really plot them out over the course of the period of you, whether it's a transformation, new implement, anything like that. How are you getting and plotting those conversations in along the way? A lot of times organizations just miss that, and they just want to have the big parade at the end. They want to
Right.
have, the big town hall, and it's all those little things in between. Creating that frequency, I would say, is what people miss the most.
So most organizations are hosting their town hall way too early in the process.
Yeah, and town hall, for lack of a better word, but whenever that tent pole moment is when you really want to sort of, open up the curtain. I find that that's usually a little too late. There are conversations that need to happen way before that, and more than one. That often just people are like, oh, of course we should have had, this
Right.
conversation or that conversation, or introduce something piecemeal so it's not so overwhelming to the organization that they're being inundated with too much information that doesn't land.
Yeah, that's true in nonprofit fundraising as well. That a lot of people don't realize when they're running a campaign, they like the idea of surprising people with this initiative, with the capital campaign that they're going to
Mhm.
do.
Oh, they're
But the
surprised, all right.
Yeah, right. But the most successful capital campaigns, by the time they get to the stage where it's public, 90% of the people should already know what's going on.
Mhm.
Like you've already gone through the major gift phase where you've actually taken time to ask people what they might give if something like this were to be announced, right? And so all the major gift people have already been well versed on what's going on. The mid-tier gift people also, they all know, right? And 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 that's a surprising thing that was missed a lot in many of the
Yeah.
campaigns that I saw launch is that people are like, well, we're going to get one or two major givers on board, but to everyone else, it's almost like they think of it as like a marketing message that they want
Mm.
to launch
Yeah.
externally. But this is internal communication. It's completely different. And
Yeah.
so any kind of initiative where a good 90% of the people don't already know that the announcement is going to bringing so and maybe that's the thing. If you're going to bring people into a town hall and good 50% don't know what it is that you're talking about, there's a mistake that's about to happen, right?
Yeah,
And
for
resistance is
sure.
going to be there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You have to show your work, not just provide the answer, and I
Right.
think that gets missed a lot inside of organizations.
Right, right. Okay, so even when we get to the stage as an individual, like if it's not organizational communication, it's just 25 people. So we're going to ask for people's input in a special way. Tell me what I'm missing. But even when we get to the point where we're just ready to make assignments, because we need to phrase that in such a way that those assignments that are being given actually feels like we're getting their buy-in in it. So instead of just making an assignment, it sounds more like, well, tell me what you think if your role in this initiative looks like this. In,
Right.
in that specific sense, does it feel like I'm missing anything? So the fact that you brought up, does it feel like I'm missing anything, is something that I feel like we should go back to over and over in the way that we're phrasing things to be like, we're not at the public phase yet. We're not ready to make
Yeah.
a big announcement, but this is what I want to do. And so when you mention the idea that, you can tell that you're the 22nd person that's been talked to already,
I've
like,
been the 22nd person. It
yeah,
doesn't
right.
feel great.
Right, right. So even if that is the transparent truth, there's still a way that we can talk to you as the 22nd person in a
Yeah,
way that is honest, but also says there's room for you to influence this. And
absolutely.
we've left it open that way. And so you need to be open. And so if you're actually not curious, you need to leave the way that you're forming your plan of action in a curious way so that your influence can really be felt in that, right?
Yeah, well put.
Yeah. Okay, well, we've had 15 minutes here and it's gone by very fast.
Sure have.
But I really appreciate your expertise and input into this conversation. I would not have wanted to do it without you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for
But we
having me.
didn't, yeah, but we didn't actually follow it, right?
Yeah.
We should have had more of a pre-meeting before we had this conversation. But you did great. Thanks very much for joining me for the first time on Lead Better, and let's do it again soon.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks,
All right.
Mikey.
Bye, Brittany.
Take care. Bye.